Los Angeles shimmers under the merciless July sun, the heat waves dancing off the asphalt at the corner of Wilshire and Western. Among the bustling crowd, a lone figure stands out. James Wilson, his military posture still evident despite the white cane in his grip and the German Shepherd service dog at his side. The bus's brakes squeal against the curb, but what should be a routine stop transforms into a moment that will spark headlines across America. The driver's voice cuts through the urban noise, dismissive and sharp. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. Until a black Porsche slows to a stop, and a familiar face steps out into the California heat. This isn't a scripted scene. It's a real-life story about how one small act of cruelty collided with an unexpected act of kindness on an ordinary Tuesday morning in Hollywood. Marine Staff Sergeant James Wilson never planned on becoming the center of a viral story. 5 years before that scorching day in Los Angeles, he commanded a 12-person unit in Afghanistan's Helmand province. His team specialized in detecting and clearing IEDs, a job that demanded perfect focus and unwavering attention to detail. Wilson had both in spades, along with a reputation for keeping his people alive. The explosion that took his sight came without warning on a routine patrol. A new type of pressure-triggered device, buried deeper than their equipment could detect. Wilson had walked point that day, as he always did, believing leaders eat last but walk first. The blast threw him 20 feet, and while his body armor saved his life, the shrapnel and concussive force stole his vision forever. Recovery at Walter Reed stretched across 18 months. Wilson fought through multiple surgeries, learning to navigate his new darkness with the same determination that had earned him 2 Purple Hearts. The doctors called his resilience remarkable. Wilson called it survival instinct. But the hardest part wasn't the physical healing. It was accepting that his military career, the only life he'd known since enlisting at 18, had ended. Maya entered his life during rehabilitation, a specially trained German Shepherd who became more than a service dog. Her steady presence helped Wilson regain his independence, one careful step at a time. She learned to guide him through crowded streets, alert him to obstacles, and even help him sort his laundry by color through scent-based training. Together, they mastered the art of civilian life. Now at 34, Wilson lives alone in a modest apartment near the VA hospital where he counsels other veterans transitioning to civilian life. His hands, calloused from years of weapons training, have learned new skills, reading Braille, using adaptive technology, and even cooking complete meals. The military precision remains in everything he does, from the way he makes his bed to how he times his daily commute. The bus route from his apartment to the VA became a daily challenge he refused to surrender to. Wilson memorized every turn, every stop, counting them in his head like checkpoint markers on a patrol route. Most drivers knew him, respected his service, and called out his stop without prompting. But there were always new drivers, temporary replacements who saw only the inconvenience of helping a blind passenger, not the man who had sacrificed his sight for his country. What happened that Tuesday morning wasn't the first time Wilson faced discrimination, but it would become the day that reminded him heroes come in unexpected forms, and sometimes the biggest statements about human dignity start with the smallest acts of kindness. Maya sensed the change in her handler's posture as they waited at the bus stop, her training kicking in as she pressed closer to his leg, offering silent support as the familiar rumble of the approaching bus grew louder. The morning started like any other on Wilson's carefully planned schedule. He'd left his apartment at precisely 7:45 a.m., Maya's harness gripped firmly in his left hand, his white cane sweeping an arc before them with practiced efficiency. The first signs of trouble came when Maya's pace slowed at the bus stop, her behavior indicating more people than usual crowded the space. The summer heat had already begun to build, pressing down on Wilson's dark blue polo shirt as he found his spot in line. He could sense the restlessness of the crowd, hear the rustle of business attire and the impatient tapping of shoes against concrete. The air carried the scent of exhaust fumes, coffee, and the particular mix of perfumes and colognes that marked the morning commute. When the bus finally wheezed to a stop, Wilson waited for the familiar sound of the hydraulic ramp deploying. Instead, he heard only the doors swinging open and the shuffle of passengers boarding. Maya remained steady, waiting for his command, but Wilson knew something was off. He stepped forward, cane extended. The driver's voice cut through the ambient noise with the sharp edge of impatience. "We're running behind schedule. No time for special assistance today." The words landed like physical blows, each syllable dripping with dismissal. Wilson felt his jaw tighten, the same way it used to before leading his unit into a hot zone. "Sir, I'm a disabled veteran. I just need a moment to board with my service dog." Wilson kept his voice level professional, the same tone he'd used countless times during negotiations with local leaders in Afghanistan. But the driver's response came quick and harsh. "Look, I've got 30 people already running late. You'll have to catch the next one." The engine revved, underlining the driver's words with mechanical impatience. Someone in the crowd muttered about schedules and inconveniences. Another voice whispered about calling the transit authority. Wilson felt his face flush, not from the heat but from the old familiar anger he thought he'd left behind in therapy sessions. Maya pressed against his leg, reading his tension. The service dog's training kicked in as she positioned herself more firmly at his side, a silent guardian in a moment of need. The crowd had grown silent, that particular hush that falls when witnesses know they're watching something wrong but feel powerless to intervene. Wilson could hear the rustle of clothing as people shifted uncomfortably, the soft beep of someone recording with their phone, the impatient tap of the driver's fingers against the fare box. Years of military training had taught Wilson to pick his battles, to assess situations with tactical precision. But standing there, exposed on the sidewalk, he felt the weight of every veteran who'd ever been dismissed, overlooked, or treated as an inconvenience after giving everything for their country. His right hand instinctively touched the folded military ID in his pocket, a habit from his serving days when he needed to ground himself. The bus's engine rumbled louder, and Wilson could feel the vibration through the sidewalk. The driver's message was clear. He was about to pull away. Maya's harness trembled slightly in Wilson's grip as she sensed his rising distress, her training warring with her instinct to protect her handler. That's when the sound of an expensive engine downshifting broke through the tension. Tires crunched on the sun-baked asphalt as a vehicle pulled up behind the bus. Car doors opened and closed, and footsteps approached, purposeful, unhurried, confident. The kind of walk Wilson remembered from his own days in command. The morning air had grown thick with anticipation. Wilson couldn't see the scene unfolding around him, but he could feel the shift in the crowd's energy. Something was about to change. Someone was about to step in. And in that moment, as he stood his ground with Maya faithful at his side, Wilson had no idea that this humiliating incident was about to transform into something entirely unexpected. A voice cut through the tension, calm and measured, carrying the kind of quiet authority that needed no volume to command attention. "There seems to be a problem here." The words hung in the air, and Wilson recognized the speaker before anyone said his name. Keanu Reeves, though his tone carried none of the Hollywood weight his name implied. The mood at the bus stop shifted instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd, phones appeared in hands, but Reeves paid no attention to the growing spectacle. His focus remained solely on the situation at hand, addressing Wilson directly with simple respect that had nothing to do with fame and everything to do with basic human dignity. Wilson felt a presence stop beside him, caught a trace of leather and motorcycle gear. Maya's posture relaxed slightly. Her intuitive ability to read people had never failed him. The actor's next words came low and direct, meant for Wilson rather than the growing audience. "I'm headed downtown. My car's right here. It would be an honor to offer you a ride, Staff Sergeant." The use of his rank caught Wilson off guard. He hadn't mentioned his military status beyond saying he was a veteran, but something in Reeves' tone suggested he'd noticed details others had missed. The way Wilson stood, perhaps, or how he handled himself in confrontation. Meanwhile, the bus driver's earlier bravado crumbled under the unexpected spotlight. His voice wavered between authority and uncertainty. "Sir, I was just explaining about our schedule." But Reeves wasn't interested in excuses. His response came quiet but firm, the kind of tone Wilson remembered using with new recruits who needed correction without humiliation. Sometimes schedules need to flex for the right reasons. The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the scene unfolding on their ordinary Tuesday morning. Phones recorded discreetly and not so discreetly, capturing the moment when Hollywood royalty chose to stand as an everyday ally. Wilson felt a gentle tap on his arm. Not patronizing, just a practical offer of guidance. "My car's about 10 feet back. Maya can lead, but I'm happy to help navigate around the bus." The absence of pity in Reeves' voice made the offer easy to accept. This wasn't charity or a publicity stunt. It was one person stepping up when another needed backup. As they turned away from the bus, Wilson heard the distinct sound of the driver's window sliding shut, followed by the hiss of the bus pulling away from the curb. The crowd's murmurs grew, a mix of admiration for Reeves and disappointment in the transit system, but both men ignored it. Maya adjusted her pace smoothly, matching their unhurried walk to the waiting car. The morning sun had risen higher, and Wilson could feel its warmth on his face as they moved away from the bus stop. In his darkness, he'd learned to read people by their actions rather than appearances, and everything about this unexpected encounter spoke of genuine concern rather than calculated publicity. The familiar click of Maya's nails on pavement changed to a softer sound as they reached the car. Wilson heard the subtle purr of an expensive engine idling, felt the premium leather under his hand as Reeves helped him orient to the passenger door. All around them, the city continued its morning rush, but here in this moment, something extraordinary had quietly transformed an act of discrimination into an example of humanity at its best. The Porsche's interior wrapped them in climate-controlled calm, a stark contrast to the humid morning they'd left behind. Maya settled efficiently in the back seat, her training evident in how smoothly she positioned herself. Wilson noted the careful way Reeves pulled into traffic, the slight adjustments he made to accommodate a passenger who couldn't see approaching turns. "I'm headed to the VA on Wilshire," Wilson offered, his hands resting on his knees, still holding his folded cane. The actor acknowledged with a quiet "I know," then added, "I've spent some time there. Research for roles, but ended up learning more than I expected." The comment hung between them, an invitation to real conversation rather than celebrity small talk. Traffic hummed around them as they navigated through Los Angeles's morning rush. Wilson found himself appreciating the subtle things, how Reeves announced turns before making them, the way he described traffic situations without being patronizing. It was the kind of consideration that came from understanding rather than pity. "You said Staff Sergeant back there," Wilson noted, curiosity finally getting the better of him. "Most civilians don't pick up on military bearing that quickly." The car slowed for a red light, and Wilson could hear the smile in Reeves' response. "My grandfather was Marine Corps. Never let anyone forget it. Plus, I've played enough military roles to spot the real thing." The light changed, and they moved forward. Wilson felt the car's smooth acceleration, so different from the jerky bus rides he'd grown accustomed to. "Those roles, they mean something to a lot of veterans," he offered. "We used to watch your films during downtime in Afghanistan. Something about the way you handle weapons on screen, the attention to detail. We noticed." Reeves' response came thoughtful, measured. "That matters to hear. We try to get it right, but there's always this awareness that we're just acting, that we get to go home at the end of the day." He paused, then added, "Real service, real sacrifice, that's something else entirely." The conversation shifted naturally to Wilson's service. He found himself sharing stories he rarely told civilians, about the heat and dust of Helmand Province, about the weight of responsibility leading a team through IED country. Reeves listened without interruption, asking occasional questions that showed genuine understanding of military operations. "The hardest part wasn't losing my sight," Wilson admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "It was losing my team. One day you're responsible for 11 other lives. The next day you're learning how to match your own socks." Maya's ears perked up at the change in his voice, and he felt her gentle pressure against the back of his seat. "The responsibility doesn't really end though, does it?" Reeves observed. "I've met a lot of veterans at the VA. They all seem to find new ways to serve, new teams to lead." The insight struck closer to home than Wilson expected. His work counseling other veterans wasn't the same as commanding a unit, but the core mission remained, taking care of his people. They discussed Wilson's current role at the VA, how he used his experience to help other veterans navigate their transitions to civilian life. Reeves shared stories from his own visits there, the conversations that had shaped his understanding of service and sacrifice. The actor's humility became apparent in how he talked about learning from veterans rather than portraying them. Traffic slowed as they approached a construction zone, and Wilson could hear the subtle changes in the engine's pitch as Reeves adjusted their speed. "That bus driver," the actor began, then paused as if choosing his words carefully. "It's not about schedules or inconvenience. It's about seeing people as people." Wilson nodded, understanding the deeper observation. "In the Marines, we had a saying, 'Leave no one behind.' Seems like civilian life sometimes operates on different principles." He felt Maya shift in the back seat, responding to something outside the car. "But then there are moments like this, when strangers step up. Reminds me why we served in the first place." The car turned smoothly, and Wilson recognized the sounds of approaching the VA. The particular echo of traffic against the building's distinctive architecture, the rhythm of veterans' footsteps on the walkway. His internal map told him they were almost there, But for the first time in years, he wasn't in a hurry to reach his destination. As they neared the VA, the conversation deepened beyond the initial circumstances that brought them together. Wilson sensed a genuine curiosity in Reeves' questions about military service, not the superficial interest he often encountered. The actor shared his own connection to service through his grandfather's Marine Corps stories, painting a picture of Sunday dinners filled with tales of chosen reservoir and unwavering brotherhood. Your grandfather's generation. They were something else, Wilson reflected, remembering his own mentors. We had a Korean War vet who used to visit our unit in Afghanistan. Walked through camp like he owned it, telling us we had it easy with our advanced gear. The memory brought a smile to his face. He wasn't wrong about the gear, but the fundamentals hadn't changed. Take care of your people, complete the mission, come home together. Reeves agreed, then shared how his grandfather's influence had shaped his approach to military roles in films. He'd critique every detail, the actor admitted. The way I held a rifle, how I carried myself in uniform. Said if I was going to represent service members, I owed them accuracy. The respect in his voice was obvious, matched by his understanding of the responsibility that came with portraying military characters. Wilson found himself opening up about his unit, sharing stories he usually kept private. He described the team's dynamics, the joker who kept morale up during long patrols, the meticulous planner who triple-checked every route, the quiet ones who always seemed to spot trouble first. Reeves listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he grasped the deeper meanings behind the stories. The thing about leading a unit, Wilson explained, his voice taking on the tone he used when counseling younger veterans, is that you carry them with you. Even now, I make decisions thinking about what my team would expect from their staff sergeant. Maya stirred in the back seat, picking up on the emotion in his voice. The conversation turned to their shared understanding of responsibility. Wilson's as a military leader, Reeves as a public figure. Both roles came with expectations and the weight of others' trust. The actor spoke about using his platform thoughtfully, about the importance of actions over words. In my line of work, Reeves reflected, people often mistake attention for impact. But real change usually happens quietly, one interaction at a time. The observation resonated with Wilson's experience helping veterans navigate civilian life, the small victories that added up to transformed lives. They discovered other common ground, a shared appreciation for motorcycles, though Wilson noted his riding days were behind him, a love of classical literature. Reeves admitted to keeping Marcus Aurelius's Meditations in his travel bag, and a belief in the importance of personal honor in a world that often seemed to have forgotten its value. The conversation felt natural, stripped of the artificial barriers that usually existed between civilians and veterans, celebrities and ordinary people. Wilson found himself sharing his frustrations about public perceptions of disabled veterans. The tendency to either praise too highly or dismiss too easily, rarely finding the middle ground of simple respect. That's what struck me about today, Reeves noted, his voice thoughtful. It wasn't about a veteran being disrespected. It was about a person being denied basic dignity. The uniform you once wore shouldn't matter, though it does make the situation more shameful. The observation cut to the heart of what had bothered Wilson most about the bus driver's attitude. Maya had remained alert but relaxed throughout their conversation, her training allowing her to stay focused while taking cues from Wilson's calm demeanor. Her presence added another layer to their discussion about service, responsibility, and the different forms loyalty could take. As they talked, the barriers between their very different lives seemed to fade, replaced by an understanding based on shared values rather than shared experiences. It was the kind of connection Wilson had once known daily in the Marines. The simple recognition of kindred spirits, regardless of background or circumstance. The VA hospital came into view, its familiar facade a daily landmark in Wilson's routine. As Reeves guided the Porsche to the entrance, the morning shift change was in full swing. Medical staff hurried across the parking lot, veterans of different eras made their way to appointments, and the everyday business of healing continued its steady rhythm. Reeves found a spot near the main entrance, but his consideration didn't end with the ride. "Let me walk you in," he offered, not as a suggestion born of pity but as a natural extension of their conversation. Wilson accepted with a nod, appreciating how the actor had managed to strike the perfect balance between assistance and respect. As they exited the car, Maya resumed her duties with professional precision. The morning heat had intensified, but the short walk to the entrance felt different from Wilson's usual arrival. Hospital staff and patients noticed their approach. It was hard to miss Keanu Reeves escorting a blind veteran, but the actor's calm demeanor kept the attention from becoming overwhelming. At the entrance, A young security guard did a double-take, his routine greeting stumbling as he recognized Reeves. Wilson smiled, familiar with the guard's voice from countless morning check-ins. "Morning, Pete," he said, maintaining the normalcy of his daily routine despite the unusual circumstances. The lobby's controlled chaos paused briefly as they entered. Wilson could hear the subtle shifts in conversation, the quick whispers of recognition, the sounds of phones being pulled from pockets. Maya moved closer to his side, her training kicking in as more people gathered nearby. A nurse Wilson knew from his counseling work approached, her voice professional but warming as she greeted them. "Staff Sergeant Wilson, you're early today." She paused, then added with admirable composure, "And Mr. Reeves, welcome to the VA." The actor's response was gracious and down-to-earth, asking questions about the facility and its needs. What happened next surprised Wilson. Instead of simply saying goodbye, Reeves inquired about the hospital's volunteer program. The conversation shifted to specific ways to support veteran services, the actor's questions showing genuine interest rather than celebrity philanthropy. "The waiting room in the PTSD clinic could use some updating," Wilson mentioned, seizing the moment. "We've been trying to create a more comfortable space for the veterans, but funding is always tight." He hadn't planned to bring it up, but something about Reeves' sincerity encouraged the suggestion. The actor's response was immediate and practical, asking for details about specific needs and current challenges. The nurse joined in, outlining various projects that needed support. Maya sat patiently through the impromptu meeting, her alertness never wavering despite the growing crowd of onlookers. As their conversation wound down, Wilson sensed it was time to head to his office. The morning's events had already delayed his schedule, and he could hear the increasing activity in the lobby as more veterans arrived for their appointments. But before he could say goodbye, Reeves pulled out his phone. "I'd like to stay in touch about these projects," the actor said, exchanging contact information with both Wilson and the nurse. "And Staff Sergeant, about that bus route. I know some people at the Transit Authority. Would you mind if I made a few calls?" Wilson recognized the offer for what it was, not just a celebrity wielding influence, but one citizen standing up for another. "That would be appreciated," he replied, thinking of other veterans who relied on public transportation. "Not just for me." As Reeves prepared to leave, the impact of the morning's events began to ripple through the hospital. Wilson could hear phones buzzing with messages, voices sharing the story, footsteps hurrying to spread the news. But what stayed with him wasn't the celebrity encounter. It was the reminder that sometimes the most powerful acts of kindness came wrapped in simple human decency. News of the morning's events spread through Los Angeles faster than the summer heat. By lunchtime, social media buzzed with cell phone videos of the bus stop incident and Reeves' intervention. Local news stations picked up the story, their headlines focusing not on celebrity involvement but on the larger issues of accessibility and veteran services. The transit company's response came swiftly, pushed by public pressure and the sudden spotlight. Their official statement acknowledged the incident as completely unacceptable and announced mandatory sensitivity training for all drivers, with special emphasis on accommodating disabled passengers. The driver was reassigned to non-public duties pending review. But the real changes happened quietly, away from the headlines. Regular bus riders along Wilson's route noticed a shift in driver behavior. Veterans at other stops reported more patience, more respect, more understanding. The simple act of helping someone board became less about schedule adherence and more about basic human dignity. At the VA, Wilson's story resonated through the halls, not because of Keanu Reeves' involvement, but because every veteran had experienced moments of feeling invisible in civilian life. His morning counseling sessions took on new energy as veterans shared their own stories of facing discrimination and finding unexpected allies. True to his word, Reeves followed through. Within weeks, the PTSD clinic's waiting room underwent a transformation. New comfortable furniture appeared, along with a state-of-the-art sound system designed to play calming background music. The actor's involvement remained low-key, but his influence opened doors and loosened bureaucratic restrictions. The incident sparked a broader conversation about veteran services in Los Angeles. Local businesses began reaching out to the VA, offering support ranging from job opportunities to free transportation services. A nearby coffee shop started a program where customers could prepay for veterans' drinks, a small gesture that created countless moments of connection. Maya's role in the story didn't go unnoticed either. Several local news outlets ran features on service dogs and their vital importance to disabled veterans. A fundraising campaign for veteran service dog training exceeded its goals within days, supported by anonymous donations that many suspected came from a certain Hollywood actor. Wilson found himself reluctantly cast as a spokesperson for veteran accessibility issues. He accepted the role with characteristic grace, using the platform to highlight the everyday challenges faced by disabled veterans. His message remained consistent. It wasn't about special treatment, just basic respect and understanding. The Transit Authority implemented new policies, including priority boarding for disabled veterans and improved driver training programs. They invited Wilson to consult on their accessibility initiatives, recognizing that real change required input from those most affected by their services. But perhaps the most significant impact wasn't in policy changes or public statements. It was in the small, daily interactions that showed how one moment of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond its original scope. Veterans throughout the city reported similar stories of strangers stepping up, offering assistance, showing the kind of respect that required no special training, just basic humanity. 3 months after that sweltering Tuesday morning, Wilson stood at the same bus stop, Maya faithfully by his side. The familiar sound of hydraulic brakes announced the bus's arrival, but now there was a difference. The driver's voice came clear and professional. "Good morning, Staff Sergeant Wilson," followed by the smooth whir of the ramp deploying. This wasn't special treatment. It was simply the new normal. The incident that began with discrimination had transformed into a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes. Wilson had stayed in touch with Keanu Reeves, their initial encounter evolving into a genuine friendship built on shared values rather than circumstances. The actor's involvement with the VA had deepened beyond simple donations. He became a regular visitor, often spending hours talking with veterans, learning their stories, and quietly supporting various programs. His influence helped secure funding for expanded service dog training programs and improved accessibility services throughout the facility. But for Wilson, the most meaningful change wasn't in the grand gestures or policy updates. It was in the everyday moments. The way other passengers on the bus now greeted him by name, the increased awareness of service dog protocols, the simple acknowledgement of human dignity in daily interactions. Maya continued her duties with unwavering dedication, but even she seemed to sense the difference in their daily routine. The tension that once accompanied their morning commute had disappeared, replaced by a sense of community and understanding. Other veterans with service dogs reported similar experiences across the city. In his counseling sessions, Wilson now shared this story not as a tale of celebrity intervention, but as proof that change was possible, that moments of darkness could lead to unexpected light. The incident had shown that while discrimination and ignorance existed, so did kindness and the willingness to stand up for what was right. The bus stop where it all began became something of a symbol, not of conflict, but of transformation. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the most powerful changes start with one person choosing to step in, to make a difference, to see another human being's dignity when others looked away. For James Wilson, every morning commute now carried a lesson he shared with his fellow veterans. In the end, it wasn't about the famous actor or the viral videos or the policy changes. It was about the simple truth that kindness, offered freely and without expectation, held the power to transform not just moments, but lives.